Taal in the Philippines. Because we are live, we're going to explain a little bit about the history, what the residents are going through, some of the factors that have really brought this to the front page of every paper, and of course live on networks across the world, including us here at CNN. But also you'll have a chance to ask questions. Just put those in the comments below, and I'll try to answer those the best that I can toward the end of this little explainer. Now, you're going to be seeing some video, and everything you see here is from the eruption that started and occurred at 2:30 in the afternoon Saturday in the Philippines. I'll run through Google Earth to show you where this is. We're going to run through history, which is extremely important to get a better understanding of everything about this volcano. The makeup, one of the smallest volcanoes in the world. We're also going to talk about how it's the lowest volcano in the world. But because it's the lowest, it doesn't mean much. Because it's the smallest, we're starting to learn that doesn't mean much in geological history as well, because this is known, this volcano is known for, historically speaking, its violent, powerful eruptions that have taken numerous lives throughout the decades and even the centuries. So again, let's start off with the basic photos that we have been seeing now. Of course, this taken just after the eruption. What you're seeing here, this plume, this is not a pyroclastic event. Now, pyroclastic means there would be molten lava flying in this major eruption. That's a major eruption. This is what we call a steam-driven eruption. And when I get in closer, and you actually be able to see a little bit with some of the video and the photos we're showing, it's really interesting where this is placed in southern Luzon, Batangas area. I'll show you that. But it's surrounded by water. It's got quite a few little factors to it. There's quite a bit of water with it, and that's playing a major role because when that water seeps in down below, inside the volcano, and starts to get superheated by the molten lava and the magma, it's just like a steam engine. So not only is it spewing steam, but it's also like boiling water. I mean, that is a main factor here. So it's not a pyroclastic event. Not yet. This could lead to that, and that's the biggest fear for everyone who lives in the region. This plume, well over a mile into the sky, well over a couple of kilometers. In fact, at one time it continues to rise up to about 15 kilometers, but it was spewing rocks and pebbles and ash as far as 6 to even 9 miles, it said in some areas. This was an image taken by a flight that was getting ready to land in Manila. Now, jet engines cannot fly through volcanic debris. Those engines kind of really start to heat up all the chemicals in this ash, and then they super cool them. It becomes like rocks, and it just tears up flights, plane engines. So again, they cannot fly through this. So they did suspend flights in and out of Manila Airport, and for good reason. Here's another image off to the side. You'll see some of the water. And when I show you the Google Earth, you'll get a good understanding of what we're watching here. But there are a number of villages, mainly fishing villages. A good 16,000 have been evacuated in from around the crater lake, or this caldera. But it is covered with ash. You can almost see kind of a gray film with this. And to get in closer, this was part of the problem. Transportation, you almost couldn't get through. It was like a thick sludge and mud. Rain created with this ash, a shower passing through, really created this mess. So again, not only was visibility reduced, but they couldn't see with that ash mixing with, of course, the rainfall on the windshields. But they're scraping this by hand. Again, they don't have the heavy technology in this area. The actual plume at 2:20 in the afternoon, 2:30, was picked up on Himawari satellite imagery, and it moved directly north. Now, the volcano itself is south of Manila, about 11 kilometers, about 37 miles or so, or excuse me, 50 kilometers. And inside that, of course, as the plume moved north, the nighttime images started to come out, and everyone could start to see creating its own lightning. This is not unusual. It happens with most volcanoes. There's even some video, you probably have seen it online. I mean, when you have this kind of a heat transfer, amazing amount of energy, like thunderstorms, when there's hail and other debris in these thunderstorms, it creates friction and you can get the lightning. So again, that's a frightening image all by itself, with that ash falling. Now, again, we talked about the automobiles. This is a big deal here because as long as it continues to spew ash and that plume moves in different directions as the wind shifts, more and more communities are going to be affected by this. All right, southern Luzon, Batangas. This is Taal Lake. It used to be called Bonbon a long, long time ago. The volcano is actually in the center, inside a lake, in this caldera, in this cone. Then you have the larger caldera surrounded by much more water. It's very interesting. But again, one of the smallest in the world, the lowest in the world, so just over 1,000 feet high, about 300 meters. But one of the more potent ones because of all the water and the resources it has to create this steam engine. What we do not want is that pyroclastic event. Now, let's talk about history, because the fishing villages are surrounding this water area, which were the first to be exposed to this ash, and of course some of the violent shaking. But to back up just a little bit, this was an abrupt eruption. This was sudden. There was no warning whatsoever, like we have in so many other volcanoes around the world. This actually is one of 24 active volcanoes in the Philippines. And again, it's on the Ring of Fire, so therefore it's quite active. Let's go back and look at the history. What we know is the most powerful volcanic eruption was in 1754 and lasted for 6 months. It exploded in a violent eruption from the month of May all the way through November. So again, that's something you don't hear about very often. This was an inhabited area until 1911. When one of the more deadly eruptions, again, it's known for its violent eruptions, a pyroclastic event with molten and lava sliding through the villages, wiped out over 1,300 people who lived there. So after that occurred, it was called and declared a permanent danger zone. No one could live there. However, it went quiet and it went silent for 54 years. And when you have that period of quietness, and you have a population that's booming, people start making their way back. Well, in 1965, about almost 200 people lost their lives with another violent eruption, not as strong as in 1911 or definitely not 1754. But then, of course, we go back to 65. This is that quiet period here again. Notice this. After 1965, we had smaller subsequent eruptions. 1966, 67, 68, even in 1976, and then 1977. During these smaller quakes, not as violent, the topography and the main structure of the volcano changed. Side vents were created. In fact, they believe on Saturday that this eruption, even though it was steam driven, created a side vent. More on what's been happening now. Since 1977, nothing. Here is a point of view camera set on this at 5-minute increments. So again, abrupt, no pre-warning to this, and all of a sudden it explodes in this violent eruption and we lose the camera. So again, with that, of course, the rumbling, they've said that they've had about 150 tremors since then. However, if you were to go on the USGS website, you'd be hard-pressed to find them because most of these are under a threshold of 2.5 magnitude. They're like 1.0 to 2.0. Now, yesterday, this is the next phase now. As you take a look, we now have sure signs of a lava fountain. This is the sign now that tells us after the steam event occurred and that eruption, we're now seeing magma which is making its way toward the surface, and you now have these fountains. So that's the next step telling us this is not through with displacing its energy. It is not over with. So therefore, we talk about the levels of warnings, the alert levels. And that's what we're going to go and talk about now, because on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 is a major eruption. Now, when it first occurred, they went right to a 3. Minor eruption taking place. You can kind of see it here. 4. Then it wasn't too much later, they moved this right to a 4. Now, when you talk about a 4, what does that mean? Well, first they have an excursion zone. They clear out everybody from about 9 kilometers. Well, they have since moved that out to like 10.5 and now 12. Originally, 16,000 fishing villages, where 16,000 people, that is, were evacuated. Now they're looking at 500,000 because what may be possible? A pyroclastic event. So level 4 means right now, frequent strong ash explosions. Lava dome is growing. We saw that with that lava fountain pictures now. Hazardous eruptions possible in the hours or days ahead. Here's what